So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining our Cylance Endpoint Security webinar. This will be the final webinar in Atrion's webinar series for 2016, but watch out for future events as well coming from Atrion in 2017 as we continue to bring you a lot of additional seminars and webinars and just continuing education information about what's going on in networking and security. Today we're proud and excited to present to you on the Cylance Endpoint Security solution. Very exciting and compelling solution that we've been working with for a little over a year. It's a very disruptive technology in the endpoint security space, and we think you'll like what you'll see as we go into this presentation. So again, my name is Dominic Grillo with Atrion Communications. I'm the Executive VP here. We've been in business for over 30 years presenting network and security solutions to our various customers, especially in the New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania markets. Today we're really proud to be working with Cylance and show off a little bit about what they're doing on the endpoint security market and kind of how they're disrupting things. So what we'll be doing is we'll have a presentation, an initial presentation by Rick Hankins of Cylance. He's one of the account executives in the area. He's going to do a little bit of a high-level overview on the Cylance solution, and then from there we're going to move into a demonstration with one of our engineers, Eric Kosmak, where he'll show you, kind of live, what does it look like, and the Cylance solution, and kind of how can it help you to prevent malware from penetrating your network.
Thanks, Dominic, and thanks everyone for joining today. Again, my name is Rick Hankins, and I'm with Cylance, and I'm going to quickly breeze through the background of Cylance and try to give you a good understanding of who we are as a company and what our technology is all about. So we are the makers of CylancePROTECT, which the industry classifies as a next-gen antivirus solution. Although it's nothing like traditional antivirus. CylancePROTECT uses artificial intelligence-based technology that's completely changing the direction of the AV industry and is really the main thing that sets us apart from our competitors and everyone else in the marketplace. Our founders are Stuart McClure and Ryan Perma, who, as you can see, are the former CTO and chief scientist of McAfee. And they left for a couple of reasons. I know that Stuart and Ryan had initially tried to build traction internally at McAfee to build what eventually became CylancePROTECT, and they never received the support internally to move forward. That's really the main reason, and they were also tired of, frankly, apologizing for the fact that the signature-based technology just wasn't cutting it anymore. So in 2012, they set out to create this technology, and they started out by providing a variety of incident response services while they developed the solution, until about 2 years ago when we finally released CylancePROTECT. While CylancePROTECT is the main focus of our business today, we still do provide excellent professional services. However, the breadth of our business is focused on this solution. We also brought on Malcolm Harkins to be our CISO. He was the global CISO of Intel for over 20 years and is a very big name in the cybersecurity industry. And he left a very lofty job with Intel because of his strong belief in what we have to offer. One of the things that drew Malcolm over to Cylance is where we stand on this chart we call the 9 boxes of control, which represents where the endpoint security industry is today as a whole. I think most people would agree that signature-based AV is not really cutting it anymore. And because of the failure of traditional antivirus, the industry, as you can see, is now focusing on high-risk and high-cost techniques that revolve around detecting and responding to cyber attacks. The industry has taken on this perception that prevention is no longer a viable security approach and that your only way to protect endpoints is to assume a compromise and try to detect and respond to malware that's already made it onto your system. Now, the problem with this approach, from a manager's perspective, is that it's the highest cost and highest risk approach to endpoint security. Detecting and responding, no matter how many automated bells and whistles you have on your tool, is still very much a manual process which raises costs. And since you're focusing on minimizing damage rather than the vulnerability, it's also the highest risk option. We are here to change this perception and bring people back to believing in automated prevention, which is exactly what CylancePROTECT provides. So what exactly is CylancePROTECT? CylancePROTECT is truly the only legitimate preventative solution on the market today. We are a pre-execution cybersecurity technology that can predict whether or not a file is malicious before it can do any harm to your endpoints. Now, I know many customers have a lot of requirements, and in terms of compliance, we do satisfy those checkboxes. So Microsoft has certified us as a Tier 1 AV replacement tool. We're also PCI DSS compliant as well as HIPAA compliant, and we're extremely lightweight. Our most updated agent is actually under 40 megs in size and only runs at about 1 to 3% of CPU, making us completely silent to the end user, hence our name, Cylance. Now on this next slide, I'd like to break down what we do and also what we don't do, because there's a lot of different technologies on the marketplace today, and frankly, it's confusing to the market. So I'm going to start on the right-hand side with what we don't do. We are not a traditional antivirus solution. We require no additional on-premise hardware, and we don't use signatures or heuristics of any kind. Signatures don't work anymore. All it takes is a hacker just to mutate the hash, just change it a little bit, and it's going to evade a traditional signature-based approach. We don't do any type of sandboxing or complicated analysis or run reports on malware that's already made it into your system. We instead prevent it from compromising you in the first place. Now shifting to the left-hand side and what we do. CylancePROTECT does not need an internet connection to fully function. You can't depend on a solution that requires a central intelligence lookup. You might have roaming agents or remote employees or users that are offline. Perhaps they log into the wrong hotspot. And if your solution's heavily dependent on the cloud, they're going to be compromised in those situations. With CylancePROTECT, you're covered in all those situations because we work on math and artificial intelligence, not a database sitting in the cloud. Because we don't rely on signatures, you don't have to worry about all these constant updates to the DAT file or signature repository. Now, you might get an update a couple times a year when we update our algorithms, which on average happens about every 6 to 8 months. These algorithms analyze over 6 million static aspects of data on every file in milliseconds. And today we block over 99% of malware pre-execution. The way we're able to do all this is using a branch of artificial intelligence called machine learning. It all starts with our cloud engine, which is called Infinity, and is hosted on thousands of AWS servers. This is where we develop our algorithms. Basically, we fed Infinity with all of the known good and known bad files that we can find, over 1 billion files in total to date. And then we reverse engineered these files to figure out all of the good and bad static characteristics of a file. The way it works is simple. If your user were to try to execute a malicious file, Cylance will evaluate over 6 million static aspects of the file, and based on what the algorithm has learned from seeing well over 1 billion files already, will generate a score based on the characteristics it has identified. If this malicious score is over a certain threshold, Cylance will stop the file from executing, quarantine the file, and alert you via email and in our portal, where you can do a deeper investigation on the malware and the security event as a whole. And again, this whole process happens in 70 milliseconds, so truly pre-execution. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to give you an overview, and I think we will dive right into the live demonstration.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Thanks for that nice overview. So we're going to move over to Eric Kosmak, one of the solutions engineers here with Atrion, who's been working with the Cylance solution for over a year now and is rolling it out, doing demonstrations like this. So he's going to provide you a nice demonstration of how the Cylance solution can work to protect you from malware. And in the meantime, too, if you do notice, there is a Q&A tab towards the bottom of the presentation. So if you do have any questions as he's going through the presentation, feel free to type them into the box, and at the conclusion of the demonstration, we'll review any of those questions and go over them with you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Rick. Hey, guys, thanks again for your time today. I just kind of wanted to go over and show you an actual live demo of how Cylance operates. So to give you a little background, what we have running here, I actually have my Cylance VM that's currently running. And a couple things I wanted to point out first. We have little task manager here. What's actually running behind with Cylance running is you have the service itself, which you can see I've highlighted here, at about 50 megs of memory. utilized, and then the Cylance UI itself too, which is actually this little agent guy down here, which gives you some information as to what is going on in the background. Now, this can be turned on or off by choice, depending on how you roll it out, but for today's demo purposes, we're going to leave it up and running. That way you can see how it notices the files that are coming through. Part of the other feature that I'll look at here, just to give you an idea, make sure it is all updated. Rick had pointed out there really aren't many updates that come out for this, based that it can be a completely offline solution for the most part. So just wanted to show you that we are currently up to date with what is running. The actual host itself, or the VM that I have running here, pretty standard machine, i7 dual core that's going to be running with 4 gigs of RAM here. So what we're actually going to do now is I have downloaded some good old-fashioned ransomware here. So the ransomware I've downloaded is actually packed or mutated. So this actually would be to a traditional signature-based antivirus solution, something that could be a huge downfall for them. This known malware that's now been out for a while, however long, now that it's packed, it's going to seem like it's a completely different file or completely different mutex of that existing file. So it's going to do the same traits. However, any kind of signature-based solution is going to honestly have a very hard time doing that. So if we open this up, I have about 95 different pieces here. Now, again, just for part of the demo purposes, hopefully your environments never encounter something this extreme, but just for a demo purpose, we wanted to be able to show this. So I'm going to leave that up, and I'm going to open up a command prompt here. So what I'm going to do first is, if you notice, these are all packed files, so what we need to do is actually turn them into executables. So I'm going to do that here. Now you notice they all have a fun little icon next to them. They're all looking like applications, but the files themselves aren't actually doing anything, which part of the policy itself that's been scoped for this virtual machine, which we'll kind of dive into later, so I can show you the ins and outs of how we were actually able to protect ourselves, or hopefully protect ourselves once I launch all of these. So they are all applications now, so what we're going to do is I'm going to run a for loop. And what this is going to do is run the actual applications basically one at a time in a row, but go down the list of full 95. So effectively, we're going to be launching all 95 of these. So one other piece that we'll point out here, I'm going to load up the performance so you can see how the system itself actually operates while all 95 pieces of malware are going to be running here. So go ahead and get started. So now you can see, based on what Rick was talking about previously, it is a preventative measure. So as these files are launching, it actually looks like for almost all of these, they're coming up as an access denied, which is exactly what we would hope to see. As that file goes to detonate this packed ransomware, Cylance is investigating it, views it, decides that, hey, this is actually malicious, and is going to prevent it completely, so it's not actually going to run there. Now, part of the little CPU spike there is really just for running that sheer quantity of files themselves. If you go to launch 100 Word docs, tech documents, whatever it is, you'll see a little spike there as well. So it looks like it actually ran through the 95 pieces here. Sometimes there's, you can see, grab the last 3 there. So what we're seeing now is on our little agent down at the bottom right here. Let me make sure you guys can actually see this. We have all of the threats listed here. So it gives you some information as far as the file name, that it's been quarantined, how it found it, and we can see the type of event here too by listing this. So now we can see the timestamp on it, the category, event, and then the details as far as where it was actually running. So it looks like in this case that Cylance was actually 100% successful, which is obviously great. Being able to stop all that at a very low CPU memory hit, the end user, if we weren't actually having all these windows up running, the end user would most likely not even realize that anything was happening, which, again, to Rick's point, being Cylance, silent, play on words there. They do want it to be very non-intrusive. You want your end user to continue working, to have no idea that they are actually 100% protected and having no problems there. So what I'm going to do now is we'll actually pop open into the tenant itself, and this is the cloud version of what we're actually seeing. This is where we can dive further in, investigate some more detail here. So once you log in, standard username and password will log you into your account. You can see a couple quick hits up front. Gives you some threat classifiers, some threat events, how many total files have been analyzed. Obviously, we have a ridiculous amount just from running different tests and demos with our agents here. So it's a nice little quick idea to see how your system, your entire company is doing under Cylance. So you can see the different threat events, the sheer count of them, and then a threat classifier to see what kind of malware or potentially unwanted programs are actually listed here. As we go through the tabs up top, you'll notice that the interface itself is relatively straightforward. Just even if this was the first time you were ever going through it, it's relatively intuitive. Depending on what you want to look at, click on it, and most links on here will take you and drill you in further. So to give you an idea, these are all the files that have just been caught on the demo that we are running. So at a glance, you can see the file name, the priority of it, audit and some other different features here, basically like what detected it, and so on and so forth. So now we know that obviously ransomware files are going to be malicious. Those are most likely going to be grabbed up in the beginning. So it's more of those somewhat gray area ones where maybe it's a potentially unwanted program that you're curious about or something that you want to dive further into. So to be able to do that, if you wanted to investigate a particular file further, once you click on the file name itself, you'll notice it takes you into the threat details of that actual file. So now we can see a couple different items here as far as the affected device itself. So we can see that this was on that virtual machine that I was running, the file path that it was actually located in, some other features too. But what I also want to point out to you is you can see the Cylance score that Rick had talked about. Now that score will vary again depending on the 6 million static aspects of that file itself. To give you a general range of a score from 0 to 100, depending on how strong that or malicious that file is. But under investigation, what you can also see is if there were any signed certificates, what the product name is, so on and so forth. You'll actually see different statistics come up here to really help you further investigate what's going on with that specific file. There might be something where maybe a file comes down where it looks like it's a PDF, or at least has the Adobe icon. You'll actually see that little icon show up on the bottom here. It gives you different identifiers of that file, so it helps with the investigation. What's a really great tool here, if you click on the evidence reports, you can actually see sort of in plain English why Cylance deemed that file was malicious. So we can see for this particular file, we look at the deception one, for instance, shows that the object appears to run invisibly but is not a background service. So generally malware is going to use a feature like that to try to deceive the host machine itself in order to bypass any kind of security, have it run in the background and then maybe download a payload, something along those lines. So now that we have kind of our English view, plain text of what's going on, we can also dive in even further and look at the detailed threat data. So what's great about this, depending on what the file itself is actually doing, you can see some really good statistical information here as far as the standard information. As you see the hash values, the file size, things like that. But we can also look to see if the file dropped anything. So in this case, it actually looks like it did drop an executable with a pretty funky name, so most likely not a great file here. But again, as you can see, you can almost click on anything here to really just dive in deep and see exactly what's going on with these specific files. So now that we know that one file was dropped, we can also look at the behavior for it. We see all these different files were affected on it. There's a couple different mutexes, and then you can actually even see all the different registry keys that have been either edited or changed of some sort based on that one file. So it's a great way to notice what's going on just from one file being run across through the CylancePROTECT engine. So once we've either deemed the file as malicious, maybe we want to set up a global quarantine policy, things like that. A lot of the quick hits are going to be right on the same page here. So you have an option to either globally quarantine it, do a global safe list if you thought that the file should have been safe listed for some reason and it actually wasn't malicious through your investigation. You can also re-download the file if you wanted to do further investigation, maybe on a dirty VM machine, just to detonate it yourself, see exactly what it does, things like that. It gives you a great overview of everything going on. And again, we're just looking at one threat, so you can imagine the great amount of detail that we can go into from each particular file that's been discovered. Won't bore you with all that, though. So what we want to look at, too, is the actual policy. So how did we create a policy that was able to protect us here? As you can see, we have a bunch of different policies out here that I've been running and testing with. So the one we actually used particularly was this VM testing one. So you can name the policy name whatever you want, just as some type of reminder for yourself. But you'll notice there's really not a ton of different settings, which is great because it gives you a really simplistic view, a really easy way to have a really good policy spec'd out to be able to fully protect yourself. So basically, we'll just kind of run through each one of these tabs here to give you an idea of how we edited or created this policy. So up front, you'll notice that we have some file actions here. And the way Cylance works is it designates either the file as unsafe or abnormal. And in both cases, what we have here as far as the executables are concerned is we wanted to auto-quarantine. This is where the bulk of the protection is going to take place as the file comes through and goes to run or is launched or detonated. The auto-quarantine is what's going to investigate that file and then just quarantine it based on the traits of that file. So it's literally just a checkbox under the executable sign that enables that or disables it. Moving along, we have memory actions. You have a couple different options here. You can notice there's a bunch of different violation types that you can actually expand out, go into it, and determine how you want to actually set up the memory actions here. Everything from stack pivots to just different injections. But at the higher level for it, really all you need to do is enable a checkbox here to enable memory protection, and then we have it set to terminate that. So essentially what that does is as that process goes to run and Cylance deems it as malicious, we have it, the policy itself will terminate that process. So the great thing about that, whereas if you had it set to a block function, the process itself can actually keep trying to run in the background, which can then cause maybe some I/O overhead where it's just constantly trying to run and maybe download a file or do whatever that trait was. Whereas terminate will actually stop that process in its tracks. Now, Rick had mentioned that Cylance is PCI compliant, and this is where some of that comes into play here, mainly for or speaking to background threat detection or watch for new files. Now you'll notice when I was running that demo, I was able to have all those executable files right on my desktop. Now, granted, they weren't actually doing anything because we didn't run anything, but initially they were just sitting there. And the reason we were able to do that is I didn't have any kind of background threat detection or watch for new files. So again, those files weren't malicious until I went to run them, which is when the file action and memory actions come into play and actually protect my VM in this case. In order to be PCI compliant, it states that you do have to have some type of scanning ability, which is why that checkbox is here. If you wanted to enable it, it'll let you run that, and it'll do a reoccurring schedule for every 9 days. So it does give you that option. Some people like that a lot. They like to have the ability to run a scan on there. It is absolutely not required by Cylance. So we saw that firsthand running the demo itself. Some other options here going down the list with the agent settings I had mentioned earlier. You actually don't even have to have those notifications set up, and you can see right here if you didn't want your end users to even really be notified that there were malicious activities occurring on their actual host, you can enable that or disabilize that I should say. So they'll have no idea that it's actually running. If you were to investigate it within the tenant, you'll still see everything that comes through. Just the end user has no idea if you were to uncheck the notifications here. They'll have no idea that pieces are coming through and Cylance is actually coming into effect. So again, another part of that, trying to be silent in the background, still give you that great protection and not intrude on the end user's daily activities. And then the last piece here that we have is script control. Some of the newer pieces of malware that we've been seeing come through kind of pertain to the macros themselves. I'm sure some of us have seen those rogue invoice emails come through looking for someone to have the invoice paid, or they're sending you the invoice, whatever that is. And there's a PDF or a Word file that comes through that looks a little shady here. So Cylance enables you to turn on script control, which then we can actually block those macros, but it also gives you some great functionality as far as blocking the PowerShell and ActiveScript commands as well. So it gives you that full kind of list of, okay, in this case we want to block all of those malicious scripts. And in any of these options, whether it be the file actions, memory actions, or even in the script control here, there is an option to build in an exclusion. So if there was something that you knew about ahead of time, maybe you had a custom script running on your machine or a custom app that you really wanted to make sure that Cylance isn't going to quarantine for any reason, you can also build that in as an exclusion list there. So it gives you that full granularity into being able to scope the endpoint protection for your environment. Some of the other features we'll touch on real quick too. We have a full device list here, so you can see all the different devices that are running on your or at least running Cylance on there. You can dive in deeper. So if we have pull up my actual VM, we can view all sorts of different files on here, what's been going on. It gives us a similar view to when we were looking at the threats themselves. Now we're actually just looking at the endpoint itself to see what's been going on, what's happening with particular malware. So it gives you a bunch of information on the device itself. You can create different policies, or I should say add different policies, set the policy how you want for that different device itself. As far as the rollout or install is concerned, this is where zones come into play. It's a great way to be able to kind of set up how you would want your device's onboarding and what kind of policy they'll get. So a bunch of different rules we can create, and they'll all stack. So if you wanted to set up whether it's a member of a certain domain name, different IP address, operating system, we can keep adding and keep going on here to say, scope it out how exactly we want it. So now we can say, okay, we do any operating system when Windows 7 running this device name, we can say gets applied to a particular policy. So in this case, we can then select the policy they'll go through. So great piece is, there is an MSI installer. There's a couple different install options too as far as rolling out the application itself. Makes it very, very easy. You can notice we do have, there's an MSI installer for 64-bit, 32-bit, as well as an executable, and it does work on Mac OS X 10 and later as well. So it gives you the kind of full option to be able to really almost protect any of the main devices out there, Windows XP, Service Pack 3, and up as well. So really runs the full spectrum here to be able to fully protect your end devices. So that's basically the tenant in a nutshell here, to give you a good idea of what was going on in the background when we were actually running that demo itself, when we were actually detonating the malware.
Thanks, Eric. Is there more you want to show off in the interface at all?
I think that pretty much covers it, at least a high level of everything that the users would be looking at, or at least the admins would be looking at.
No problem. Good. So we did have a few questions come in during the demonstration. So one of the first questions we asked is, can we describe the effectiveness against zero-day threats? Also they were assuming the management console is hosted in AWS, but if so, how can they get logging internally to like their SIM perhaps?
Sure. So to touch on that first part about what was it about the 0 days?
Yeah, effectiveness against zero-day threats. Yeah.
So if you think about it, Cylance itself almost treats every piece of malware really as a 0 day. There are no traditional signature files. There's nothing that it's got a repository of to know about it in the background. It's really investigating those files, and at least at the policy we created at that point of it running. That's where the true prevention comes in. It deems that file is malicious in this case when we were testing it, and automatically quarantines those files. So that was part of the reason I was using packed malware, as it's not a traditionally seen virus that's out there. The malware that was running, whatever that signature is, we repacked it. So now technically, even on a signature-based system, that's going to supersede that. That's going to be able to get around the signature itself.
Good. Well, thanks. And can you also respond to the question about, if the management console is cloud hosted, as it is here with the CylancePROTECT, how could we extract logs from it, perhaps to a SIM that the customer may host in their internal environment? Sure.
Yeah. So there is a setting within the console itself that you can add, whether you have a syslog or a SIM. There's a couple of pre-canned ones, Splunk, Logarithm, things like that that are already predefined in there. You can also add a custom one too if you had one that you wanted to add to it as well. It's as simple as going into your settings on the tenant itself, just adding into really just a checkbox, turning it on, and then adding in your information there.
Good. And then another question came in asking, well, how does Cylance deal with false positives? So if you can, kind of talk to that.
Sure. So generally, if you were looking to start rolling out Cylance into your own endpoint or your own environment, what we would do is we'd want to start by running the endpoint itself in a default policy. Basically what that's going to do is it's going to give us all the investigative properties of Cylance without auto quarantining. So obviously you're not going to want to start testing malware right away on a default policy because the true protection is not actually there yet. The reason we run it in a default policy first is to get an idea of your environment. So if you do have custom apps, there are different applications you have running. Maybe there's something specific to your environment that wouldn't necessarily be out in the wild. What we do is in that default policy, once it's all done, we'll see, give it a couple days to run. When we go back into the tenant, we'll be able to view, okay, Cylance hit on this, this, and this. And then through those investigative properties that we went over through the protection tabs, we can view each individual file if need be and say, okay, oh, this is our custom login script, or okay, this is our custom application. We can then create, if you remember when we were looking at the threats themselves, we can click on that safe list button, which will then globally safe list it across your tenant there. So anybody else within your organization with Cylance Endpoint Protection on there, if it is, let's say, that custom login script, that's going to be safe listed or whitelisted. So it's not going to actually, so Cylance won't pull from that or won't quarantine that. So really, a long story short, if you running the defaults, it gives us a good idea of what your environment looks like, and at that point we can spec it out to work appropriately within that environment.
Great. And then another question that came in was, does Cylance perform IPS, like intrusion prevention style services, or do you have to rely on another vendor for that sort of functionality?
I'm sorry, say that again. It was breaking up a little bit.
Okay. Does Cylance perform intrusion prevention services, like services type stuff like IPS, or do you have to rely on another vendor to provide that sort of functionality?
Well, so the endpoints themselves, as those files are kind of running through and being detonated, Cylance is going to be that preventative measure. So that's what is going to, whether deny it or allow it. So as far as an IPS, they wouldn't necessarily be required. You look through it at Cylance itself running. That's what's going to be your preventative measure. That's what's actually going to be denying or allowing those files.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key things, is just the idea that Cylance is a preventative solution, and that it's doing everything pre-execution. So it is going to act very similar to what almost like a host IPS is doing for you in that sense. So it's not doing anything on the network side, but at the endpoint is where the real focus is there.
Right. You want to be able to protect your most valuable resource, where you have all these different endpoints that are in your environment. As people are coming, maybe they're allowed to take their laptops home, their kids play on it, whatever it is. If you bring that back without Cylance, you bring that back in, an IPS is something that could be required there because it could spread laterally. But with Cylance on there, as soon as that malware or potential malware goes to detonate, if it is malicious, Cylance is going to auto quarantine it right at the source. So it doesn't even have the chance to propagate anywhere else.
Great. And one more question that came through is, does Cylance deal with cryptoware in the same way that it deals with general ransomware?
Yeah, so it's exactly that. Cylance, back to what Rick had mentioned, where it investigates about 600 or 6 million static aspects of that file itself. So if it deems it as malicious, when we looked at that clear text before in the tenant to say, in that one file we looked at, it used deception in that case to try to circumvent any kind of protection agent that would be on the endpoint. So similar aspect to that, whether it's a ransomware, cryptoware, whatever that case is, as soon as that file goes to run, whatever that file is, Cylance is going to be on that endpoint. It's going to investigate that file. It's going to, in this case, if it is the cryptoware, it is going to auto quarantine it. It's basically going to work the same as any other file. And that's why, kind of getting back to that 0-day question too, it really does treat all those files essentially as 0 days.
Good. And one more question came in too. Can Cylance work in conjunction with other malware products? So if I've got a traditional AV already, what do I do?
Yeah, absolutely. So through running different demos and different POCs, we've had with people, we kind of get the mixed gamut, but Cylance can absolutely run side by side with an existing AV. So there's a couple different things that we'd want to do there. Obviously, because Cylance is only going to look at depending on the policy, if Cylance is only set up to look at the files at their execution point, as opposed to watching for new files or doing a background scan, but your traditional AV is doing a background scan, if it knows about that file, it's obviously going to pull it first, and then there's nothing for Cylance to see. But we've had customers that literally run both in conjunction, so chances are their traditional AV has many more hooks into the system. So it's going to be a little heavier. It's going to be able to use all of the CPU in your system. So if that whatever your traditional AV is, as that file comes through, chances are it's going to use 100% of your CPU, and I'm sure we've all kind of been there, and it really locks down the machine. So there's a couple things that can kind of come into play there, where obviously if let's say your traditional AV knows about it, it pulls it first. Cylance won't see it, but if it doesn't see it, Cylance is absolutely still there and running in conjunction with it, and we'll be able to stop it at that prevention level. So again, yeah, it absolutely, you can run both AVs, whatever your traditional one is, alongside Cylance, especially in that beginning phase, if you're kind of testing both out.
Good. Well, thanks, Eric. Thanks for the demonstration and for answering a lot of questions. I think that was the final question that we had so far in this webinar. So I do want to thank everyone for attending and for letting us educate you a little bit about what Cylance is doing on the endpoint. I know that this is Dominic speaking with Atrion. I can talk to Rick where he mentioned like some of the founders and stuff. I had the opportunity to have dinner with him a couple months ago when I was out in the Irvine, California area where Cylance is based, and they really have it together in terms of what they're doing as a company. Where a lot of it's not so much just about necessarily protecting the endpoint, but Stuart and Ryan have the vision of being able to protect the world, from cyber threats, and just from a cybersecurity perspective, they want to be able to be kind of the good net citizens to really help things. I mean, are they going to make money if they do well with the product? Absolutely, but it's really kind of interesting to see the higher vision that they've really established as a company. So with that, I want to thank you guys. Rick, do you have any final comments you wanted to add in?
No, just thanks again, everyone, for your time today, and hopefully we can have further conversations with anyone that's interested. Please reach out to the Atrion team. They're one of our best partners, and we really enjoy working with them.
Great. Well, again, thanks everyone for attending, and thanks Rick, and thanks Eric for presenting with us today. You do have, if you're looking at the slide that's up there, you do have the contact info for both Rick and Eric. So if you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to either of them. And obviously, if you have any other questions and you know who your account executives are within Atrion, feel free to reach out to them as well. So we thank you for your time and look forward to having you at our next webinars or seminars coming up in 2017.